The neon sign flickered one last time before dying completely. In that final flash of dying light, Marcus saw his own reflection in the rain-soaked window of the abandoned record store. 23 years old, guitar case in hand, standing alone on a street that had once promised everything but delivered nothing. This is the story of how dreams can become the very shadows that chase you through the emptiest corners of the world's biggest city. A story that begins not with hope, but with the sound of footsteps echoing down an endless boulevard where broken dreams collect like fallen leaves. Marcus Reed had always believed that talent was enough. Growing up in Cedar Falls, population 3,847, he was the kid everyone knew would make it big. His fingers found melodies on his father's old acoustic guitar before he could properly tie his shoes. By 16, he was playing at the local diner every Friday night, watching the same faces light up with the same songs, week after week. But Marcus wanted more than the comfortable applause of familiar faces. He wanted stages that stretched beyond horizons, crowds that sang his words back to him like prayers. He wanted his name on billboards, his voice on radios across the world. Most of all, he wanted to matter in a way that a small town could never contain. The decision came on a Tuesday in October, when the autumn leaves matched the rust on his pickup truck. His mother stood in the doorway of their modest home, tears streaming down her weathered face as Marcus loaded his life into 2 suitcases and a guitar case held together with duct tape and hope. "Promise me you'll call," she whispered, pressing a folded envelope into his palm. Inside was $300 in crumpled bills and a note that simply read, "Follow your heart, but don't lose yourself." The bus ride to Los Angeles took 36 hours. Marcus spent every mile staring out the window, watching America blur past in a symphony of endless possibilities. The small towns gave way to suburbs, the suburbs to urban sprawl, and finally to the glittering promise of a city that never slept. When the Greyhound finally wheezed to a stop at the downtown terminal, Marcus stepped onto the concrete with the confidence of someone who had never truly failed at anything that mattered. The October sun painted everything golden, and for a moment, the city felt like coming home. The first apartment was a studio in Hollywood that cost more per month than his father made in 2. Marcus convinced himself it was an investment in his future as he signed a lease that consumed 2/3 of his savings. The walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every crying baby, every shattered dream of his neighbors. He found work at a vintage guitar shop on Sunset Boulevard, spending his days restringing instruments he couldn't afford and listening to customers tell stories about the ones that got away. The owner, a leather-skinned man named Eddie who claimed to have roadied for bands Marcus had never heard of, paid him just enough to cover rent and ramen noodles. Every evening, Marcus would walk the streets with his guitar, searching for open mic nights and opportunities to be discovered. He played outside coffee shops, where baristas would occasionally drop coins into his open case. He performed at dive bars, where the audience was more interested in their conversations than his music. He auditioned for record labels where receptionists would smile politely and add his demo to stacks that seemed to reach the ceiling. The months began to blur together. Marcus watched his savings dwindle like sand through an hourglass. The phone calls home became less frequent, partly because he had less good news to share, but mostly because the sound of his mother's voice made him feel like he was drowning in homesickness. Before we continue Marcus's journey through the shadows of the City of Angels, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. His story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss where this path leads him. By December, Marcus had performed at 43 different venues. He kept a notebook where he recorded every performance, the date, the location, the size of the audience, and how many people actually listened. The numbers were getting smaller. The city that had once felt golden now seemed gray and endless. Marcus would walk for hours, his footsteps echoing off empty sidewalks as the neon signs hummed their electric lullabies. He began to understand that Los Angeles wasn't really a city at all, but a collection of lonely people pretending they weren't alone. The guitar shop became his sanctuary, the only place where his knowledge and passion still seemed to matter. Eddie, despite his gruff exterior, began to notice Marcus's growing melancholy. "Kid," he said one afternoon while Marcus was mechanically polishing a vintage Stratocaster, "this city eats dreamers for breakfast. You either adapt, or you become another ghost haunting the Boulevard." Marcus met Sarah at an open mic night in Silver Lake. She was a poet with dark hair and darker eyes, and when she spoke her words, the room fell silent in a way Marcus's music never seemed to achieve. They began spending evenings together, sharing coffee that grew cold as they talked about art and authenticity and the way the city could make you feel invisible even when surrounded by millions of people. "The trick," Sarah told him one night as they sat on the roof of her apartment building, the city sprawling endlessly below them, is to find beauty in the loneliness, to make art from the emptiness. But Marcus couldn't find beauty in the rejection letters, couldn't make art from the silence that followed his performances. He was beginning to realize that talent might not be enough, that dreams required more than desire to survive in a place designed to crush them. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Thursday in February. Marcus had auditioned for a record label that morning, performing 3 of his best songs for 2 men in expensive suits who spent more time looking at their phones than listening to his music. "We'll be in touch," one of them said without looking up. Walking home in the rain, Marcus passed a street performer playing guitar outside a closed theater. The man's case was open, but empty except for a few scattered coins. His fingers moved across the strings with the muscle memory of someone who had been playing longer than Marcus had been alive, but his eyes were distant, unfocused, lost. Marcus stopped and really looked at the man for the first time. He saw his own future reflected in those empty eyes, and the recognition was devastating. That night, Marcus called his mother for the first time in 6 weeks. The sound of her voice, warm and familiar and impossible far away, broke something inside him that had been holding together through sheer determination. "Mom," he whispered into the phone, standing in his empty apartment with rain streaking down the windows, "I think I made a mistake." She listened as he told her about the auditions that led nowhere, the performances for audiences that didn't care, the way the city could make you feel like you were shouting into an endless void. She listened as he described the loneliness that had become his constant companion, walking beside him down every street, sitting next to him in every empty venue. "I thought I was following my dreams," Marcus said, his voice cracking with exhaustion, "but I think my dreams were just running away from something else." His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit when something isn't working. That doesn't make you a failure, sweetheart. That makes you human." Marcus's story is about to take a turn that will change everything. If you're invested in his journey, show your support by subscribing and giving this video a like. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen in our darkest moments. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that felt both like surrender and liberation. He walked into Eddie's shop and found his boss tuning a beautiful Martin acoustic, the kind of guitar Marcus had dreamed of owning since he was 12. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said. Eddie looked up, his weathered face showing no surprise. "You're going home." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, feeling tears he didn't know he'd been holding back start to fall. "This city breaks more people than it makes," Eddie said gently. "But it also teaches you things you can't learn anywhere else. The question is whether you'll let it break you or let it make you stronger." Marcus spent his last week in Los Angeles walking the streets he had come to know so well. The boulevard that had once seemed full of infinite possibility now felt like a museum of his own failed ambitions. Every corner held a memory of hope, every venue a reminder of silence. On his final night, he performed one last time at the same Silver Lake coffee shop where he had met Sarah. She was there, sitting in the back, and when his eyes met hers, she smiled with the kind of understanding that can only exist between people who have shared the same beautiful failure. Marcus played 3 songs that night, not for record executives or industry professionals, or even for an audience that was really listening. He played for himself, for the journey that had brought him to this moment, for the dreams that had led him so far from home only to teach him where home really was. The bus ride back to Cedar Falls took the same 36 hours. But this time Marcus watched the landscape change with different eyes. The urban sprawl gave way to suburbs, the suburbs to small towns, and each mile felt like he was traveling not just through space, but through time, back to a version of himself he had almost forgotten. His mother was waiting at the bus station, and when Marcus saw her standing there with tears in her eyes and hope in her smile, he understood something about love that the city had never been able to teach him. She hugged him without asking questions, without demanding explanations, accepting him exactly as he was in that moment. The house felt smaller than he remembered, but also warmer. His old room was exactly as he had left it, his childhood guitar propped in the corner like a faithful friend waiting for his return. That first night home, Marcus lay in his old bed listening to the sounds of a small town settling into sleep. The distant whistle of a freight train, the gentle rustle of wind through familiar trees, the profound silence that had once felt suffocating but now felt like peace. He found work at the local music store, teaching guitar lessons to kids who reminded him of himself at their age. There was something deeply satisfying about passing on not just technique but passion, about watching young faces light up when they finally mastered a difficult chord progression. Marcus began writing again, but the songs were different now. They carried the weight of experience, the depth that comes only from having ventured far from home and found your way back. He wrote about loneliness and belonging, about dreams and the courage to let them evolve, about the way cities can echo with emptiness and small towns can resonate with connection. The Friday night performances at the local diner resumed, but Marcus brought something new to the stage. His music now had layers that hadn't existed before his journey. The same faces that had always supported him found new reasons to listen, hearing stories in his songs that spoke to universal experiences of loss and hope and finding yourself in unexpected places. Sarah called him one evening in late spring. She had moved back to her hometown in Oregon, she told him, and was teaching poetry at the local high school. Funny thing about leaving, she said, her voice carrying the same wisdom that had drawn him to her in the first place. Sometimes you have to go away to understand what you had all along. 1 year after returning home, Marcus stood on the small stage of Cedar Falls Community Center, looking out at an audience of maybe 50 people. It was the annual fall fundraiser, the same event he had performed at every year since high school, the same event he had once considered beneath his ambitions. But as he looked out at faces he had known his entire life, faces that had celebrated his victories and mourned his defeats, that had sent him off with hope and welcomed him back without judgment, Marcus understood something profound about success. The song he played that night was new, written in his childhood bedroom during a thunderstorm that reminded him of all the storms he had weathered. It was about a boulevard where dreams went to die, but also about the roads that led you home. It was about loneliness in crowds and connection in small spaces, about the difference between being heard and being understood. When the last note faded into the comfortable silence of the community center, the applause was genuine and warm and exactly enough. Marcus saw his mother in the front row, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of pride rather than goodbye. After the show, as Marcus packed up his guitar, a young girl approached him shyly. She couldn't have been more than 12, with braces and nervous energy and a guitar case slung over her shoulder. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, "I want to be a musician when I grow up. Do you think I could ever be good enough to make it in a big city like you did?" Marcus knelt down to her level, seeing himself reflected in her eager eyes. "The real question," he said gently, "isn't whether you're good enough for the big city. It's whether you're brave enough to define success for yourself." That night, Marcus walked alone down Main Street, past the diner where he had first performed, past the bus station where his journey had begun and ended, past all the familiar landmarks of a life that had always been enough, even when he couldn't see it. The streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalk, but Marcus no longer felt alone. He carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings you home to yourself, that sometimes the most important dreams are the ones you discover when you stop chasing the ones that were never really yours. In the distance, a freight train whistled its lonely song, and Marcus smiled, understanding finally that loneliness and solitude were different things, that you could be surrounded by millions and feel empty, or stand alone on a quiet street and feel completely whole. Marcus's journey from the boulevard of broken dreams back to the road that led him home reminds us that sometimes our greatest adventures are not about reaching the destination we planned, but about discovering who we are along the way. What did you think of Marcus's story? Drop a comment below and let us know what city you're watching from, and tell us which song or band you'd like to see inspire our next narrative journey. Your suggestions help shape the stories we tell, and every comment is a reminder that even in this vast digital landscape, we're all connected by the universal experiences of hope, loss, and finding our way home. Until next time, remember that every boulevard has an end, and every road has the potential to lead you exactly where you need to be.